Okay, we're starting it.
Okay, guys.
Okay, let's keep going.
I just remembered that in grade 10, it was ironic, it was as a joke,
Very
but I used to say, I don't give a swag.
Where did we get that from?
Like a 12-year-old boy you heard say it and you're like,
I said it once, and my friend laughed.
oh my goodness.
That was the end. I was like, alright, this is it. Welcome to White Wine!
What? Okay. I can do better. Okay,
You got this.
This is Rochelle. She's our mom. All of us mom. This is Kaylee. She is, I don't know. She's here. She's my sister.
Okay.
This is Erica. She's Erica. Okay. And I'm Jillian. And I'm here also.
Okay, do you want to share the social media?
Oh yeah. We have TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and podcast
And
Facebook. And what even is the handle? The official what?
The
Or is it
official
what?
WWP.
Oh, we changed it so many times. Okay, the official WWP.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so there we go. Okay, so last week we did a podcast on wedding traditions. Only a few, only covered a few for what we had now. We know there's like many different wedding traditions out there, different just, cultures and everything. This is just what we knew. And so we covered a few of those, and it was kind of fun actually. And but there was one that, not a wedding tradition, but something that often you guys heard, I definitely heard at weddings, that we didn't actually talk about. And so we actually thought that would be fantastic segue into this week and what we're going to talk about. So, who wants to say it?
We know what they're doing tonight.
It's like you're like old uncle, and it's sitting to talking to some random people. We know what they're doing tonight. Ew! Why are you thinking about that?
Exactly. Can you imagine you're leaving your wedding with your husband for the first time, and everyone's like,
wow,
thinking about what you're going to be doing together that night.
It's such a personal thing.
Yeah.
And your grandpa is talking to your friends. Stop!
Cannot imagine.
Yeah, that's a little awkward.
So, yeah, that definitely was I don't know what to do with that. But it's amazing what it does, though, is it's amazing the things that we say and that we do, that we think, that we believe, all those things that we just don't even question. How many times people say that, and I bet you, they don't ever even think about it. They just think it's funny, and whatever. And, that's kind of our whole purpose of this podcast is that, wait, what? What are you saying?
Ew.
So, but what that does is it actually it started us into another whole conversation, because that's one thing that we have no problems going into a whole bunch of different topics. And one of the topics that it took us to was purity culture.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And so we know this is a huge topic, but we all really believe that it is such an important one. And we want to today just start the conversation. So we thought the first thing that would be really important is to sort of define purity culture. Define what we have as a definition, what we're going off of. And so that anyone seeing this we'll have a definition to start with, like a platform, a
Yeah.
place to start of what, so you have a groundwork of where we're coming from, because that's one thing that we did find is like there's a ton of different definitions out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I Googled it because I was curious what people would say on the internet. So I'll give you that definition, and then I'll kind of go into what we are kind of talking about. So the first one that came up was purity culture has many... Oh my goodness, what is this? Many use it in its most literal form to refer to efforts, especially in conservative, Protestant, or evangelical, I would put there, Christianity, to promote sexual abstinence before marriage. So that's kind of part of it, but we got talking today, and I think when we think of purity culture, again, it's such a big topic, but really what it boils down to is that your worth as a person, as a human being, as a woman specifically, is tied to your purity, which we'll go into later. Later we'll go into what purity means, but really that's just, I mean, from the world's perspective, that's your virginity. That's you having sex.
yeah.
So...
Which is specifically and heavily put on women.
Yes. Yeah, like this movement, we wanted to say also, definitely affects everyone. It affects all of us. But specifically affects women. And obviously, since we are all women, we will be talking about how the purity culture, how the purity movement affects us as women.
And that was something like I had no idea, no clue. Purity culture, purity movement. I mean, like we're gonna tell sort of where we each came from a little bit later, but like when you guys started talking about like purity culture, purity movement, even I was like, what? I honestly I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
Didn't know what it was. So then as we got talking, you know, because when you read the definition that you read, you think, okay, what's the problem with that? Like, you know, but again, and this is something that, you know, I think we're going to bring up probably almost every podcast, but it's just like, you know, we're so taught to try and look at everything like as good or bad, right or wrong. And so like in my mind, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Is that a bad thing? Like,
yeah.
Yet we know, because we've experienced it, that things can be taken to other levels. Things can become toxic. Things can become maladaptive. Things can become whatever. They can harm people, though.
Yeah.
And so, like, you, specifically, Erica, I know have done a lot of reading and research, and by no means, like, none of us are experts on this or anything.
Definitely not.
But you've done a lot of reading on, like, the purity movement itself, sort of where it came from, what it, and that.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about purity culture, purity movement, it's a very complex issue, obviously, because as I said, it really has to do with women. And so, you know, a lot of this goes back to, like, the treatment of women and the belief around women in history. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with, what you were talking about with, like, the show Bridgerton.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
I mean, so many people love that show.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they were, like, number one. I think they're number one now on Netflix, like, for the number of streams or something. Like, they broke records. Anyways, so second season coming, like, you know, like pretty fast for a show, and like honestly, I loved watching the show.
Yeah, I did too.
I love timepieces, but you know, I just was really interested in how it was going to put together anything, you know, like by Shonda Rhimes. Like, I mean, I appreciate her her take on a lot of different issues and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really neat to see. And then, but so the show though is a timepiece, but they have changed things in it. And you know, one of the things that we got talking about was, so like in there, I mean, obviously like they talk about how there are dowries and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and how you see very clearly in this show, and they even say it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was that way, is that the girls are raised and their entire life is about getting to the point where they get married.
Yeah.
And like that is their entire life. And they say that in the show, like, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
everything leads up to like that moment of them to get married,
Yeah.
you know. And as we got talking, it was like, you know, we talked about the saying that people are like, oh, we've come so far.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wait.
Mhm.
I won't say it again. But like, have we really though? Because I don't know, like we see all the time that how, you know, right from little, there's always this like, oh, like, oh my goodness, you have a boyfriend, and oh, who's your
Mhm.
boyfriend? Like right from like little, and oh, you know, and then as soon as you get a boyfriend, it's like, oh, when are you getting engaged? When are you getting married? When are you having kids? When are you like, and it's just this whole, like, that's sort of your whole life is defined by
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Mhm.
and that kind of brings in, to, like, with purity culture, is how, like, especially, like, little girls are like, oh, but, like, or little girls are taught that, like, oh, well, what is your future husband gonna think?
Yes.
Like, you're gonna, do you really want to do that? Because you're gonna have to explain this to your future husband, and what if he doesn't want you because you did these things? And it's like, you're literally training a freaking 5-year-old, whatever. You're training a child to get married one day, to be a wife, instead of just a kid. And I think it's really sad how we kind of steal, like, little girls' childhoods, because we kind of force them into, well, you're going to be a mother one day, you're going to be whatever, and you have to stay pure for your future husband, or he's not going to want you.
Well, and that was the other side in the show as well. It was very clear the huge difference between men and women is how, like, you know, like, she went into the garden, and that was like the end of the world
Yeah.
for her. Yet the guys, you know, are having sex with who knows who and how many and whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they have places that they've bought and paid for other women in their lives, and you know, whatever. But like, you know, she can't even be seen alone with a guy, let alone do anything.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, then it was going to be like, okay, then they're having a whatever, like a duel to the death, like, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa. And then we think, like, we're like, oh, but we don't do that anymore. Okay, no, maybe we don't do the duels to the death and that. But has our thinking really changed that much
Yeah.
from that?
Yeah.
Totally.
So that's kind of where we wanted to go forward is, you know, like, you can see this throughout history. I mean, the purity movement, as I will get into, and as I said before, is very ingrained. I mean, at this point, it's just kind of our society. A lot of people have had this experience. But it specifically applies to the Christian church. Like, this is very much where what we're speaking about started. And so going forward from that, you know, you've always had these kind of teachings and these beliefs around women, clearly, because, you know, we can see shows like that, that no, it was not based on real people, but these things did happen to women. And so I read a book, I'll reference it at the end, about the purity movement, and this lady interviewed people, and she talks about the history of the purity movement. And, basically what happened, again, I'm not an expert. I will give references for what I'm speaking about. You can go look it up. In the States, in the Evangelical Christian Church, there was a big push in the early 90s with this purity movement, where the purity movement joined sort of with capitalism to become a business. So that's kind of where you get the purity rings, the purity balls, purity Bible, pledges. You know, you get all of these tons of books, programs around the idea of saving yourself for marriage, and like I said before, your worth kind of being tied to your sexuality and your purity. And so, yes, the purity movement is such a complex issue, and even though that movement has died down a bit, you know, like there was a book that came out that was very instrumental in this movement. I don't want to reference it because it's not a good book, but the author actually came out in the last couple of years and denounced everything he wrote in the book. So we are, you know, and there isn't as much money going into this stuff anymore, but these beliefs are still very much here, you know, like you were saying about, you know, when people watch Bridgerton and it's like, oh, we've gone so far, and it's like, we actually haven't, we've just kind of changed how we talk about it, so it's just kind of more disguised.
Yeah, totally.
So, do you want to go into, like, what purity...
Yeah, well, like, kind of, because I feel like when we talk about, like, purity, most people will think of, like, oh, like, sex. So you're a virgin or you're not a virgin. Which, I mean, virginity is a whole nother topic that we'd probably talk about one day. But
Yes.
Purity includes this version of purity, which I personally hate the idea of even, like, calling someone pure. But it doesn't just include virginity. It also goes into literally everything, and specifically with women, because the purity movement is absolutely linked with misogyny. So it has to do with the way women dress. You know? So, well, you're not keeping yourself pure if you're wearing revealing clothes. You're, you know, dirtying yourself. Someone won't want you if you're wearing revealing clothes and people are seeing your body. It goes along with, like, the way you talk, even. The way you talk to the opposite sex. The way you talk about your sexuality, which is none at all supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things. It has to do, and it really, a lot of it comes with even just the way you think. It's like a lot of churches like to talk about, like, lust and how lust is a bad thing, and so it even goes into the most uncontrollable thing, like your mind, your thoughts, even just thinking about these things, and not just sexual things. It can be literally just crushing on a boy when you're young or when you're old, thinking about these natural things that you think about when you're when you start going through puberty or when you're just growing up. Like, purity is kind of linked, or it has to do with so many things, and almost every move a woman makes determines whether you are pure or not, whether you're worthy or not.
Well, and those, you know, that's something, I mean, this sort of maybe goes off a little bit, but when you're talking about, like, the thoughts, and, you know, like, I guess my thinking is, and wondering, is that, you know, like, when we have those thoughts, they're very similar to, like, when we have emotions. Like, we can't control that. We can't control an emotion when it hits. We can't control a thought when it enters our head. We don't know. Like, that isn't something that, you know, because otherwise then we would actually be able to read our own minds to know what's coming, to be able to control. Like we can't, you know, and when that is made bad, that is when shame sets in. And when shame sets in, shame becomes like, I am a bad person. And when we do not understand what that emotion is, and now, like, shame is not a good or bad emotion. It just is. An emotion is an emotion. It's not a good or bad thing. When emotion hits, an emotion is a sign. It's like it's a light that comes on in your car. You know, when your tire's getting low and the light comes on, that's what an emotion is. That's all it is. It's just a sign to tell you that something's going on. Pay attention to me and whatever. So when shame hits, it's not like, but the problem is that then what happens is when people are shamed for those thoughts, that is not good. Because then they've made themselves bad. And I don't know, like I just, you know, like one of the thoughts, like I had a thought before and I'm like, for example, when, you know, like, okay, so I know this is going to kind of get us into some, you know, kind of jumping in here, but, you know, like I thought about it again and I thought, okay, so we were talking before about how, you know, like if a girl is wearing whatever, it doesn't even have to be like revealing or anything like that. And, you know, like a guy might think like, oh, she's really hot. And I wonder if, because oftentimes, instead of just like, wow, she really is beautiful, instead of just appreciating, it becomes a, like, right away, like, oh my goodness, she's trying to get attention, she's whatever. I mean, you know, and you can go on with the things, like, and so I almost wonder if, because those thoughts and those things have been made bad, like the shame has been put on, if then that's why it actually is a shame response. It's like, oh, that's bad, I shouldn't think that, so, oh my goodness, there's something wrong with her then. When there's nothing wrong with anyone. Like, that this is natural and like this is life.
Well, and I think there's like a hard line with that of like, I think personally it's totally fine to notice someone and be like, oh, they're very attractive or whatever. But a lot of times it crosses the line where it's not just noticing someone's attractive, it's completely objectifying them and making them this kind of, you know, object just for you to admire. And I also, like, I think that's really interesting, like, the thought of, like, maybe it's a shame response. And I think that would especially be prevalent with, like, you know, people, like, men who grew up very religious, or anyone who grew up very religious. You know, but obviously there's another part to that, too, of just how, like, women have kind of been demonized, and women are not allowed to just own their sexuality. It's only allowed when they're being sexualized. So I just think, there's just so many, like, parts, there's so many parts to it that need to be, or can be considered.
So, and again, I mean, like, this is such a big topic, and, you know, we definitely are going to do more on it.
We'll do lots more episodes on purity culture.
Exactly. We just thought, like, this time we would sort of talk about how purity culture has affected each one of us, or what we've understood from it, or, you know, just whatever. And so, for me, such an interesting topic, because, like, honestly, I'd never thought about it until you guys started talking about it. For me, it wasn't anything that was talked about. It just was. Like, you just didn't have sex before marriage. period. That was bad.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So there's lots that comes to my mind and whatever, but you know, like that's just the way it was. Like I never even, I would never have even questioned it because that was just bad.
Yeah.
And so now when you get talking about purity culture and sort of the dangers of that, so a way that, which I've now heard that this is actually very common, but how it can affect some women, some guys probably, I don't know, but affected me, and I know others like me as well, but was so growing up, and it's just a bad thing. And a few of my friends got married before I did, and I remember literally having conversations with them after they got married and asking them, you know, and I don't know if any of them would ever remember me asking, but I would remember asking and saying, like, okay, so, like, how did you go from 1 minute going, sex is bad and it's like evil and you can't have any kind of thoughts towards this other person, or I mean you really like them, but like there's always a line, and like it's just a bad thing, and then literally within like seconds of like I pronounce you husband and wife, now all of a sudden it's this good thing and it's great and you can do it anytime you want and you can like and whatever. And I remember like asking friends of mine, going like, how does that happen? Because I could not figure out in my mind how I could make that, like, how do you make that switch? How do you go like 20 years of this is bad, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to flip the switch of this is good now. Yeah. And now I can kind of do anything I want, and we can just, you know. And so for me that was, you know, definitely, and I know I've heard that's actually very common.
Yeah.
Very common in purity culture, which I had no idea. I just thought it was me. I'd never, like, because my friends, I mean, they didn't know either. They were just like, I don't know, like, you just do, like, you know, and honestly, like, I think, my own thoughts here, I think and I believe it steals so much joy and enjoyment that could be had in marriage, because I know that was a huge obstacle for Brian and I. Like, that was a huge thing for us to have to deal with in our marriage, because and you can't talk about it either, because you don't talk about sex. Like you can't talk about anything, so it's like you're kind of caught.
So you just like do it and then hope that like hopefully the awkwardness will go away. Hopefully we'll figure this out.
I guess so.
Oh gosh, that's so sad.
Well, like, because nothing was ever, like, you didn't talk about anything.
Yeah.
So, because that was just the way it was. So, yeah. So, anyways, like, I mean, so that was one thing that, like, I was like, I'm changing that conversation in our house. You know, like, so I was very specific in, like, how I would talk about sex and stuff and whatever, and I'd be like, you know, because I mean, of course, as kids always are like, ew, like, you know, you say sex and oh my goodness, and I was, you know, I was always like, no, it's actually amazing, like, it really is, like, it's great, like, it's fantastic, it feels great, like, you know, whatever, because, like, I didn't want that same thing in your guys' minds, like, I didn't want that same story going to you guys, but, you know, and now, like, I mean, learning even more, so, you know, I do want to talk. So one of the things, for example, how we talked about our kids, I found this example online or something. And I know this is something that you want to talk, I'm pretty sure you want to talk about or get into. So one of the ways that sex is often talked about is that it's a gift.
Yep.
And so when you think about it, it's like, oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm giving this gift. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No idea about what you guys heard and what other people hear in that, though.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's this beautiful gift, like,
Yeah.
whatever. However, even though, like, you know, we didn't say it that way, there is people that did say it to you guys like that. And what was the story there?
Well,
then?
okay, so the thing with the gift analogy is there are many, many different analogies here, right? So, like, there's the chewed up gum.
I've
There's...
never heard that.
I'm...
Oh my
Which
goodness.
is so surprising. I mean, like, I'm glad, but...
Yeah, like, so happy that that was never put in your brain. Yeah, like the chewed up gum, the open gift, the tape,
the
rose,
the shoe.
The licked lollipop.
Yeah.
Like,
so many.
These, you know, like, youth pastors are so creative.
So creative.
It's not even creative. They just go into a room and they're like, go.
Yeah,
that's a woman.
Yeah. So they come up with these analogies. So we can go with the chewed up gum and the gift. So these things that are good, right? Like, everyone wants a piece of gum. Most people do. Everyone wants a gift. And so the idea is, oh, you open the gift and it's done. But so, like, you are this open gift that can never be put back, that can, because, like, this is your oh my god, I don't know, I'm losing it. You are this, like, opened gift. So, like, your value is gone. This chewed up piece of gum. So, great, like, everyone wants a piece of gum. But once you chew it, no one's gonna re-chew a piece of gum. So then you're discarded. Like, that's how they would talk about sex. So once you have sex, you're a chewed up piece of gum. So you better be with that person forever.
Yeah.
You better,
because no one else is gonna want you.
Yeah.
Like
the gift. You can never wrap it up again. So once you open it, you're done.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's no going back.
Yeah. And that when you guys explained it that way, I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, wow. And so another thing that we did that I know came across very differently to you guys, and again, we had no idea, was a ring.
Oh.
So we decided, because I thought, I mean, who doesn't like rings anyways? Rings are awesome jewelry, so why not? So the idea of the ring, and I didn't like the actual, like the formal idea of the ring. So like the purity movement, like the ring was what you probably know better than me. So with this purity movement that I discussed before, a purity ring symbolizes a promise. Generally speaking, it's a promise between you, your parents, and God that you will not have sex until you get married. You will stay pure. Right. So, yeah. Like, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, anyways, that's really not fine. What I want. Well, yeah, no, but really. Because, and we can get into that another time, really, because I don't think we're going to have time today. But the reason, so my thinking was, like, I love the idea of the ring, and so we changed the story of it for you guys. But because that movement and that culture is so ingrained in our society and ingrained in life, that's not what you heard. So for me, for Brian and I, for us, what we wanted to do is we wanted to give you a ring that was our, because we gave it to you. Like the thing that I never understood about it was, so I'm giving you a gift, but then you're going to make me a deal to give you the gift. Like, that's not a gift. So to me, I was like, I wanted to give you a gift, and what it meant to us was, this is our commitment to you, that no matter what happens, anything, this is our commitment to you, that we are always here, that we will always stand with you, beside you, behind you, with, like, whatever you need, we will always be there for you.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the message, because of what was actually out there, what other people told you as well. So anyways, I know we want to keep going, because we'll keep going over that, but so you had talked a little bit of about purity, about like dressing and stuff, and I know that's something that for you, Jillian, that was something, like a story that came up for you at one point, about sort of like to do with that, like purity culture, but to do with purity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Haven't talked in a while. Like, Grant's like, well, years ago, I don't know how long ago, a couple years ago or something, there was like this event at the church that, I don't know, we were playing a game at the park that the church set up, that like a water game with like pool, and I don't know the game. I didn't end up going, but they're like, I can't remember exactly. They either like handed out a piece of paper with like the information, where it is, what time it is, like, and it said like, oh, here it is, this is the time, and then it was like, but girls like can't wear bikinis, like you have to have a one piece, and I was like, what? Okay, I only have a two piece, but like my two piece covered everything. It was just like, but I was like freaking out when I was like 10 or something, and I was like, what? I only have a two piece, or it was in the email, I can't remember, but somewhere it said like, girls can't wear a two piece, you have to wear a one piece, and I was like, I only have a two piece, man.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do?
Well, and I think it really shows how just women like are not people in a lot of ways. We're not like seen as just people, because a 10-year-old in a bikini should not be a big deal. It's a kid with a kid body. The thing is, a 10-year-old's body is not sexual. You are making it sexual. When you say, well, oh my gosh, you can't wear a two-piece. Okay, well, why? So what are the reasons? They say, well, boys are gonna look, and they're gonna have these thoughts. Well, maybe you should teach them how to respectfully spend time with a girl in a bikini. I don't know, just a thought. And if you have a problem with your leaders, with adults, with anyone looking at them, then maybe you should look into yourself and wonder why you cannot handle looking at a 10-year-old's body. Because that's quite alarming to me. Because I've never in my life... I'm kind of going off. I've never in my life heard someone say, oh, I can't look at a 10-year-old boy in swim trunks. Whoa, that's so sexual. That's ridiculous, because it's just a kid in swim trunks. It's not a big deal. So why is it that the second we start talking about girls, whoa, why are they being so sexual? They're sexualizing themselves. No, actually a child can't sexualize themselves, but you can, and you are.
Yeah.
well, and then why can't a teenager wear, like, you know, and honestly, like, we were part of that. I was part of that. Because I was told as well, like, I mean, I was not allowed to wear bikinis, you know. I wasn't allowed to wear like a tube top. Anything that didn't have straps to make sure and hold it up, I wasn't allowed, you know. And like, you know, okay, so, and then again, like, that's where I'm like, okay, have we changed a whole lot, really? Like, you know, how far really have we come? And like, even if an older girl wants to wear a bikini or tank top, you know, like, I think the conversation needs to change. The conversation does not need to be like, the problem is the girl that's wearing that, you know, because we were even talking before too and saying, well, you know, because sometimes people say, well, she's just trying to get attention. Okay.
What's the issue with that? Like, why
Someone
why
needs
does
attention.
that cause you so much? Why does that cause you so much upset, anger, like whatever? Because we all do things for attention. That's like also not saying that every time a girl does something it's for
No.
attention.
No,
But
definitely not.
I've definitely done stuff before for attention. We all do. Like, it's totally normal, and I
You
don't
buy
know
a pair of
why.
shoes because you want attention, because you think they're cool. You buy
Yeah.
a certain jacket, you buy a hat, you buy like
Yeah.
whatever, because at time, like not everything that everyone buys is for attention, and
definitely
that's the
not.
same. But there are times that you do, like you
Yeah.
whatever, you go buy a certain shade of lipstick because
You know, people are gonna like. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm gonna wear this outfit to school because I know my friends are all gonna be like, oh my gosh, you look so good, and it's like, I just find, and guys do it too. That's
Yeah.
the thing. But I feel like the only time we talk about it is when girls do it.
oh, I know a whole lot of guys that have way more shoes than girls do, have way more jackets than girls do, way more hats than girls
Yeah.
do, and they are all looking in the mirror in the morning the same as the girls are.
Mhm.
Some guys spend longer in the front of the mirror than girls do to make sure their hair's in the right place
Yeah.
and look in the right way because they want to look good. And there's
Yeah.
so many.
And there's
we're kinda getting off,
nothing
so.
wrong with that. But another thing, like, that Julian's story reminded me of was a story that I have, which there's so many of these, but I think it just shows a perfect contrast between men and women. I was on a worship team at a church one time, and I was wearing like a spaghetti strap tank top, whatever. And listen, I had a bra on. It was high up. It covered my full. It went like below like my waist, whatever. Nothing was gonna be seen except my like shoulders and like
Neck?
collarbones. Like, I don't know. Also, I was probably 13, maybe 14. Anyways, I come to do worship and I had to change. Pretty sure it was summer also. And I had to change into this big, heavy flannel, and I was like sweating bullets. Like, I was so freaking hot. And all the other guys, it makes me so mad. All the guys on the worship team are wearing those, like, what do they call, like, I don't know, like those long, baggy, like shirts that they have like the big loops like under your armpits.
It goes all the way down to their waist.
It goes like the loop like goes all the way down to their waist, like
Yeah.
a tank
the
top.
armhole.
It was
the
wide.
armhole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
goes,
Yes,
like,
the armhole goes like all the way down to their waist, and
Yes.
like, sorry, but their nipples were literally hanging out. And yet they said, oh my gosh, you have to change. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, because, you know, you're, like, representing the church. Like, what's going to happen if, like, a parent sees you and they're going to think that their kid could dress like that. Or it's going to encourage kids to dress like that. Or it's going to encourage guys to look at you in a certain way. And I was like, so, these guys, like, adult men's nipples hanging out isn't causing anyone to think anything? Get out of here, because I am a teenage girl and I talk to teenage girls and I know what they think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I know that they're
Exactly.
not exactly all pure thoughts, so get out of here. Anyways, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that shows the perfect contrast of we completely sexualize women's bodies and we just do not do it the same way to men.
So is there anything else that you wanted to, or?
Yeah, like we were
Sure.
kind of going through like how purity culture has affected us. So, is there anything else you wanted to share?
I mean, we're gonna do other episodes on this,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So many.
I
Okay.
think we should. I think
could go
I
on.
gotta stop ranting for today. I might start yelling.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe you'll sleep yet.
Oh my
Okay, so for you,
goodness.
Erica, how, like, you know, we kind of had a bit of, you know, conversation already, like
Yeah.
with, you know, the ring and, you know, how we talked, but
So the thing, like, I think, first of all, everyone takes this messaging very differently, and I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know I had received this messaging literally until last year, until I read a book. Again, I'll reference it later, and I was shocked. I was completely shocked, because I know, looking back on my childhood and up to now, like, the opinion, the view around sex, as we've already discussed, was very much attached to your value. Like, you as a person, as a woman, are not valuable unless you are a virgin until marriage.
right.
And so, you know, I remember receiving all those messages. So, like, the chewed-up gum.
That
You
one
know,
still gets me, honestly. I just...
Like,
and,
the
like, to
idea-
have people tell someone that, like,
A
it just...
child.
Yeah.
Like, it just fries me. Like, I just
I know.
don't... Anyways,
Yeah, wait, can I
just-
make a comment on this?
Yeah.
Because it's this idea that you lose a piece of yourself
Yeah.
when you, every time that you have sex, and, you know, you're gonna get to a point where there's nothing left.
Yep.
And I just want to say, that is not true. You are not less of a person when you have sex. Like,
Yeah.
I agree, sex is a big thing and it can have emotional repercussions, and I think to varying degrees for different people, but you are no less of a person because you had sex. You are still you. Like, yeah.
See, and one thing that got me was the fact that other people were telling you this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like, whose business is it of anyone else to tell my kid that stuff? Like, that really got me, too.
Yeah.
I'm like, this should be a personal conversation. Like, that would be your and my conversation.
Yes.
Anyways.
Yeah, like, the idea, because, I mean, I think we talked about this in the first episode where, like, our world was very much the same.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, we grew up in the church, and in different communities, and they were all very much the same. They all believed the same thing. And I remember receiving, like, the gum metaphor, literally the gum metaphor, from church before I was even in junior high.
Wow.
Like, literally at church, from male leaders, too.
It was always men.
And it
And
was
I was like,
always
this is awkward.
directed towards us girls.
Yeah.
That you better save it. And then I also remember receiving it from family friends, like adults in my
that
life.
just
Again,
gets me.
before junior high,
Yeah.
like a kid receiving these messages that you have to save yourself. You have to make all these decisions. And so I remember being little, always thinking, like, whenever I made a decision, whenever I had a thought, whatever, that I have to do something and not do something or whatever, so that for my husband in the future. So we were
Right.
talking about this before, that
Yeah.
with this, we train girls specifically. A lot of people obviously receive this messaging from little to be thinking about their husbands. So when I was 5, I did not know who that was going to be. I still don't know if that's who that's going to be. I don't even know if I'll get married someday. So the thought that a 5-year-old is making decisions based on this person that they have to make happy already.
Yeah.
Because the decisions I made when I was 5, when I was 10, 15, 20, all impact this person that I don't even know yet. And so I remember, like, receiving those messages and actively deciding not to do anything. And so I went completely nothing. I never talked about guys I liked. I made myself not like guys at all.
Well, it was
Yeah,
always made bad.
Yeah, like,
Really,
it
for you.
was very shameful. like, to be sexual at all. So, like, going back to what you were talking about with purity, purity isn't just, oh, you aren't pure anymore because you don't have sex. That has to do with, like, oh, you just like a guy. I'm gonna have to tell my husband someday that I liked a guy, and he's gonna think less of me because of that. And it's like you're racking up this list of, oh my goodness, I liked this guy when I was 5, and then I don't know, held hands with a guy. I never did that. But, like, you, like...
You kept your hands and feet in the rod.
Like,
no,
you got absolutely nothing on the list.
But, like, I have so many things on the list, actually.
Oh,
but,
good.
Not physical things, obviously, because I've never done anything with a guy. But you, like, start racking up this list that you're like, oh my goodness, like the tape. Each thing is like a piece of tape sticking to something, and the problem is you never know how many it's going to be, but you're just like, I remember being so stressed and having so much anxiety about, I don't think he's going to actually, like, I don't think I'm going to be able to find a guy that's going to be fine with this.
Right.
Like, and literally, I never had sex. Let's just, like be very clear here. It's not like I had sex with anyone. I literally have never kissed someone. So it's not like these things are like, you know?
Well, it's so funny to look at how you went and how I went, because I remember thinking, I felt like kind of like this tug of war of like, I felt like I had to give up this stuff to guys because that was like all I could offer. Like, I felt like I had to, or I wasn't gonna be like cool and I wasn't gonna be liked. But I also felt like, I remember feeling just like petrified at the thought that I was gonna screw up. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like one day I'm gonna get in a relationship and I'm gonna end up doing it because I'm gonna get out of control and I'm gonna have sex and then my whole life's gonna be ruined. And I remember literally like spiraling into these like almost panic attacks when I was like a kid, being like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna screw up my whole life and I'm not even gonna mean to.
See, and that's like interesting because it's like, and I thought like we're having conversations, like we talked about stuff.
Yeah, we did.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. And like, I'm just so thankful that we had like more conversations and that we could keep having conversations. And I know we have like so much more. So, I mean, obviously we're going to do like another episode because we're, you know, like we're trying to keep them, you know, not like super long. So, like maybe we'll just record another one like right away even and just sort of keep going. But we'll sort of wrap this one up right now. But again, like the purpose of these of this podcast always is to have conversation. And that's one of the things that I want to so encourage as parents. And you know what? If your parents aren't going to talk about it, kids, teens, you can talk about it. Bring it up with them. And if they're uncomfortable, you know what?
If you think it's a safe space,
that's okay. Right. Like, well, that is true. Because, and that's really important. Because, you know, if it's not a safe space, you know, find somewhere that is a safe space. Find someone that is safe for you. Totally. Like, don't go against your gut feeling. Like, if you got a gut feeling that it's not going to be a safe space and it's not good, like, definitely I don't want to encourage that because, you know, but having, so as a parent, I'm like the conversation about the gift, the conversation about the ring, well, it wasn't conversation. It should have been a conversation. Like, I look back, and if to change things now, I would have a conversation, more of a conversation with you. Like, hey, how are you receiving this? What do you think? What's on your heart right now? What are you taking from this? Like, you know, it was just, we just told you what our side was. And we didn't ask what you thought. You know, and so I really want to encourage parents to ask the questions. Ask, you know, and for kids then to have that courage then to speak up and say that, you know, like, I mean, if your parent's asking, and again, if as long as it's a safe space, but like, we just, again, really want to just expose and deconstruct and work through and talk and like all these things, these beliefs, these sayings, these, you know, that are just so ingrained in our society and life and families and minds and women, you know, for this, and really just have those conversations. So I know you wanted to share though before we wrap up.
So I was just gonna say, I mean, first of all, with everything we're talking about, this topic, especially for right now, we want to hear from you. You know, if you have any questions about what we talked about, if you have stories you want to share, experiences, whatever, please just reach out. We love talking about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then, as I've said throughout the episode, I wanted to give a couple resources that people can look up, because this is not a widely talked about topic. And so if you're wanting to learn more, please take advantage. So there's like the book that I've mentioned a few times during this podcast. It's called Pure, even Pure, Inside the Evangelical Movement That Shamed a Generation of Young Women and How I Broke Free, by Linda Kay Klein.
And we'll post it.
Yeah,
we'll post it below.
We'll probably post it on our social media,
Yeah.
and we can share a link. That is where you can read all about the purity movement that started in the 90s, and she just interviews, I don't even know, hundreds of women, I think, from the evangelical church in the States, and how, and like their experience through this. And then also you can just search her name, Linda Kay Klein. She has a lot of podcasts that she talks to a bunch of different people about this as well. So that's a great place to start if you're wanting to learn.
Awesome. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I think we'll wrap this up by, you know, I mean, I think we had it like pretty clear, and it's like, wow, we can still keep going here. So we'll definitely be talking some more, but reach out on all our platforms and everything, and we'd love to have more conversation, and hopefully this will bring conversations to you guys too. So
Okay.
that's wrap.
See you next week on